Banished to the frozen northern wastes, a young widow was supposed to die at the hands of a legendary monster. Her treacherous family cheered her departure, oblivious to the ancient prophecy they had just fulfilled. What was meant as a cruel death sentence became the awakening of a bloodthirsty empire. Snow lashed against the iron-reinforced timber of the carriage, driving a bitter chill through the floorboards. Rosalind drew her threadbare woolen cloak tighter around her shivering frame, her breath pluming into the freezing air. She was 22, a widow of merely 3 months, and currently a prisoner of her own bloodline. Her father, Lord Reginald Croft, had made his intentions agonizingly clear. She was no longer a daughter of the prosperous Croft estate. She was a liability, a curse, and a pawn to be sacrificed to the untamed north. Lord Reginald's voice still echoed in Rosalind's mind, a cruel phantom mocking her over the howling wind. "You bring nothing but ruin, girl. Percival is dead because of your misfortune. The people whisper that you are cursed, a widow who brings the grave to the men who share her bed. Let Eamon Wycliffe deal with you. A beast for a curse. It is a fitting end." Her stepbrother Ewald had stood beside their father, a vicious smirk playing upon his lips as the guards dragged her to the carriage. They had stripped her of her silken gowns, her mother's jewelry, and her dowry, dressing her in the coarse wool of a common servant. They were sending her to the Wycliffe territory to settle a generation-old border debt. The Crofts owed the Northern Territory a treaty signed in blood decades ago. By sending Rosalind a tarnished widow, Lord Reginald was delivering a grave insult to the North, fully expecting that the notoriously brutal Lord Eamon Wycliffe would slaughter her in a fit of rage, neatly solving the Croft family's political and domestic problems in one stroke. Rosalind stared out the frosted window. The familiar rolling green hills of the southern valleys had long since vanished, replaced by jagged, imposing mountains and endless forests of black pine. This was the Wycliffe domain, a place entirely forgotten by the warmth of the sun. Legends surrounded the territory and its reclusive master. They called Eamon Wycliffe the Beast of the North. Rumors spoke of him as a savage warlord who tore his enemies apart with his bare hands, a monster who consumed the hearts of those who crossed his borders, commanding a private army of men who were more wolf than human. Her late husband, Percival Reed, had been a cruel and drunken nobleman. His death had not been the tragedy her family pretended it to be. He had ridden out for a hunt in the northern woods and was found a week later, torn to pieces, his flesh mauled beyond recognition by what the trackers claimed was a pack of unnaturally large wolves. Rosalind had felt no sorrow, only a hollow, terrifying relief. But that relief had been short-lived. The Croft family needed a scapegoat, and the silent, unweeping widow was the perfect target. The carriage jolted violently, pulling Rosalind from her grim reverie. The horses whinnied in terror. Outside, the shadows between the massive pine trees seemed to shift and elongate. Rosalind leaned closer to the cracked glass. Through the dense curtain of falling snow, she saw them. Eyes. Brilliant, piercing amber eyes, floating in the darkness, keeping pace with the carriage. They belonged to massive, shadowy figures, moving with terrifying silence through the deep drifts. Wolves. But they were larger than any wolves she had ever seen, their shoulders sitting as high as the carriage windows. A whimper escaped the driver from above. The carriage accelerated the wheels, slipping dangerously on the icy path. Rosalind braced herself against the wooden walls, half expecting the beasts to crash through the doors and tear her to ribbons, just as they had done to Percival. Instead, the wolves merely escorted them, a silent, menacing honor guard, guiding the condemned woman to her final destination. Hours bled into a frozen eternity before the carriage finally lurched to a halt. The heavy oak door was yanked open, revealing the stone-faced driver. "We are here, my lady. May God have mercy on your soul," he muttered, refusing to meet her eyes. He practically shoved her out into the biting cold before scrambling back onto his perch and whipping the exhausted horses, desperate to flee. Rosalind stumbled into the snow, looking up. Wycliffe Keep loomed before her, a colossal fortress of dark, ancient stone carved directly into the side of a jagged mountain. It was not the crumbling, barbaric ruin she had expected. It was magnificent, albeit terrifying, with soaring towers, iron-wrought gates, and massive hearths glowing ominously through stained-glass windows. Before she could process the sheer scale of the estate, the heavy iron portcullis shrieked as it was raised. A contingent of guards marched out, clad in thick furs and dark steel. At their head was an older woman with iron-grey hair pulled into a severe knot, holding a blazing torch. "You are Rosalind Croft," the woman stated. It was not a question. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the blizzard. "I am," Rosalind replied, forcing her trembling chin high. She would not die begging. The woman's eyes swept over Rosalind's meager clothing, her expression unreadable. "I am Hilda, housekeeper of Wycliffe Keep. The master has been expecting you." Though, she added a note of quiet disdain creeping into her tone. "We expected Lord Croft to send a virgin bride, not a widow draped in rags. Your father plays a dangerous game, girl. My father is a coward who hopes your master will do his bloody work for him," Rosalind said flatly. Hilda's eyebrows raised a fraction of an inch. A flicker of something akin to respect crossed her hardened features. "Inside, then, before you freeze to death. The beast does not like his meat frozen." Rosalind swallowed hard and followed Hilda into the cavernous maw of the keep. The great hall was astonishingly warm, heated by a roaring fire in a hearth large enough to roast an ox. Tapestries of dark, rich colors lined the stone walls, depicting scenes of deep forests, ancient battles, and massive wolves howling at the moon. The air smelled of pine wood smoke and roasting meats, a stark contrast to the sterile, perfumed halls of Croft Manor. "Wait here," Hilda commanded, gesturing to a heavy wooden chair near the fire. "The master will inspect you shortly." Rosalind sank into the chair, the heat of the fire slowly thawing her numb fingers. She stared into the dancing flames, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was entirely alone in the lair of a monster, abandoned by everyone she had ever known. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the heavy thundering footsteps of a warlord coming to claim her life. The heavy oak doors at the far end of the hall did not burst open with a violent crash, as Rosalind had anticipated. Instead, they swung wide with a smooth, silent grace that betrayed their massive weight. A man stepped out of the shadows, and the very air in the hall seemed to shift, drawn toward him, as if he possessed his own gravitational pull. He was staggeringly tall, his shoulders broad enough to fill the doorway. He wore no crown, no ostentatious jewels, only a simple tunic of dark wool, and a thick mantle of black fur draped carelessly over his shoulders. As he stepped into the light of the roaring hearth, Rosalind's breath caught in her throat. Eamon Wycliffe was not a scarred, misshapen beast. He possessed a rugged, devastatingly striking countenance. His jaw was covered in dark, coarse stubble, and his cheekbones were high and sharp, framing eyes that glowed with a startling, brilliant amber light, the exact color of the eyes she had seen tracking her carriage through the freezing woods. His dark hair was somewhat unkempt, brushing against his collar, giving him an untamed, feral elegance. He moved with a silent, predatory grace, closing the distance between them, with slow, deliberate steps. Rosalind stood up instantly, her knees shaking, though she forced her spine to remain perfectly straight. Eamon stopped a few paces away. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he simply looked at her. His chest expanded as he drew in a deep breath through his nose, his amber eyes darkening to the color of burnt honey. A low vibrating sound, something horrifyingly close to a purr or perhaps a growl, rumbled deep within his chest. "Rosalind of Housecroft." His voice was a deep, raspy baritone that seemed to vibrate against her very skin. "Your father has a poor sense of humor." "My father has no sense of humor, my lord." Rosalind replied, her voice remarkably steady, despite her terror. "He is simply cruel. He sent me here as an insult to your house, hoping you would kill me and save him the trouble of arranging a quiet poison." Eamon's eyes locked onto hers, burning with an intense predatory focus. And why would a father wish death upon his own flesh? "Because I am the cursed widow," Rosalind said bitterly, the old wounds tearing open. "My late husband, Percival Reed, was torn apart by wolves near your border. My family believes I bring ruin. I am of no political use, I carry no dowry, and my reputation is stained. I am Trash Lord Wycliffe. They threw me onto your doorstep." Eamon stepped closer, his imposing height forcing Rosalind to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. The scent of him washed over her rich earth, fresh pine needles, and the sharp metallic tang of iron. It was intoxicating. "Trash," Eamon repeated softly, reaching out. His large, calloused hand hesitated before gently catching a stray lock of her dark hair that had fallen across her frozen cheek. His touch was unexpectedly warm, almost searing. "Reginald Croft is a blind, arrogant fool. He looks at a diamond and sees only glass." Rosalind frowned, confusion momentarily overriding her fear. "I do not understand." "No, you would not," Eamon murmured. He dropped his hand and turned toward the fire. "Your father thought he was delivering a supreme insult. He thought he was tossing away a useless widow to a savage northern warlord. What he did not know is that he was walking directly into a trap I set 3 years ago." Rosalind's eyes widened. "A trap?" Eamon looked back over his shoulder, the firelight casting demonic shadows across his face. "Did you truly believe it was a coincidence that Percival Reed died near my borders? Did you believe it was random, mindless wolves that tore him apart?" A cold dread pooled in Rosalind's stomach. "You ordered his death. I executed it." Eamon corrected his voice, dropping to a terrifying, deadly calm. "Percival Reed was a drunken swine who struck you. I knew what he did to you behind closed doors. I smelled your blood on his hands when he dared to ride near my territory. My pack tore him to pieces because I commanded them to." Rosalind took a stumbling step backward. "Your pack? You commanded the wolves." "We are Wycliffe," Eamon said, turning to fully face her. The amber light in his eyes flared, bleeding into the whites. His fingernails elongated, sharpening into dark, lethal claws against the firelight. "We do not merely rule the beasts of the north, Rosalind. We are the beasts." The realization hit her like a physical blow. The legends were not metaphors. The beast of Wycliffe was literal, a werewolf, an apex predator hiding in the guise of a nobleman. "Why?" Rosalind whispered, her voice trembling not with fear, but with an overwhelming chaotic shock. "Why care about a southern lord's wife? Why orchestrate this debt? Why demand a bride from my father, knowing he would send me—" In the blink of an eye, Eamon crossed the space between them. He did not grab her, but he stood close enough that the heat radiating from his massive body enveloped her completely.